Hello, and welcome to possibly the last video of this quilting series. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do any more, what those would entail, but the final video here is working on the binding. So I will be cutting fabric, and then I will be obviously making the binding and then adding it to the quilt. So there are going to be a few things I'm going to talk about first. The number one thing being, in the last video I showed you what color pattern I decided to do, but I didn't tell you like how wide or how long I wanted the strips to be. So I have decided that probably the best width is going to be 2.5 inches. And when it comes to the length, I was really trying to decide like what looked good. So I kind of just made little, well, I didn't really make them. They were just like my scraps. I kind of just laid them out beside my quilt, like next to the border, and just to see the different lengths or whatever that would look good. So first I started out with just my 5-inch ones because I have, you know, those little 5-inch squares that I made. So I laid them down and I thought, I don't know, see, it doesn't look quite right because laying them down next to, it's kind of hard to explain, but if I'm laying them down next to the border, on the other side of the border is, you know, my squares that I have that are also 5 inches. But the problem is visually it looks strange because if the 5-inch square here is not lined up with the 5-inch square on the other side, I'm probably just weird about it, but it just didn't look good. Like it just, something was off about it. So I thought, okay, can't do 5 inches. I thought, you know what, this was a long shot, but I'm gonna try 10 inches and see if I put, you know, the two 5-inch ones together. So I laid that down, and yeah, that's a definite no. That was pretty ugly. So then I thought, oh no, part of me hopes this doesn't look good because it's gonna be kind of a pain, but I thought, you know what, I have 5-inch squares, how about I just half that and do 2.5? So then, you know, I folded them, you know, how I needed to and kind of laid them out, and honestly, I really like it. So I'm gonna end up doing 2.5 by 2.5 little squares to make my binding. So that means I'm gonna have to cut more fabric. But you know what, at the end of the day, I'm thinking I have a lot of time. I have like a month and a half to finish this, you know, and I literally have one step left, so it's fine. And I want it to look like really good. And I think doing the smaller pieces of binding will just be better. Because overall, the smaller the pieces, the more kind of color you're getting in a smaller area, if that makes sense. When I did the really long ones, it just looked, I don't know, it just didn't look good. I'll probably like show pictures throughout this just to kind of like show you what I'm talking about. But anyway, that's pretty much where I've got my start here. All right, so we need to figure out how long we're going to need to make our binding strip. And I am going to try to do a continuous one and follow the method that I saw on YouTube. So what I did first is I got the lengths and widths again. So 89 inches for the width, 104 for the length, times 2, because there's, you know, 2 sides. So 386 inches. Okay, and then this number right here, I did 386 plus 20. So I have no idea what the 20 is exactly. I'm not sure if that's accounting for seam allowance or what. I was just reading online to add an extra 20 inches. Now I'll be surprised if I only am gonna need an extra 20 inches, but I figured it in just the same. So then we got it to 406. So then I figured, okay, each piece I wanna make 2.5 inches. So to figure out how many pieces I'm gonna need total, I did 406 divided by 2.5, so I got 162.4. So I just rounded that, you know, to 163. And then I needed to figure out how many, I didn't put this part down for some reason, but I needed to figure out how many of each color I was gonna need. So that is gonna be 163 divided by 4 because I have 4 different colors, and then it ended up being like 40 point something, so I just rounded it to 41. So in theory, if this formula works out, we would do 41 strips of each color. Now again, I am skeptical of this, but at least we kind of have a starting point, and then we can go from there. Okay, so the very first thing I did to get ready to do the binding is I actually looked at my scrap bag. This is just all pieces that didn't quite work out, you know, was slightly off on the measurements. So I actually had like quite a few. I mean, it's a mix. It's like I have my 5x5 squares. Some of them, again, like weren't quite 5x5. Like that's an odd size. And then I have, you know, some like black and white under here. And I'm actually going to use those to cut them down to the 2.5 by 2.5. I want to try to use as much of this fabric as I can, especially the stuff that's already like cut, because I don't want to have like a ton of little scraps lying around. If I can use those first and then go from there, I think that would honestly be best. And I actually had a whole bag of 2.5 by 5. That's another reason why I chose 2.5, because I figured like, well, it would just be a little bit easier to go about it that way. And this, so there's only like 3 of these white ones, but there's a ton of these black ones, which I don't understand that really, like at all. Like, how did that even happen? So really with these, all I have to do is cut these in half. So that's like a lot of black right there. So that is awesome. That's a big chunk. But yeah, white, obviously I'm gonna have to cut a lot more, and you know, some random stuff here. Have a little bit of colored, but yeah, these are the scraps that I just absolutely could not use. But that's fine, not a big deal, but it's gonna be a pretty good start. So these ones I didn't really have to iron because they kept nice in the bag, but these I just threw in there. So I went ahead and ironed all these out so they are nice and ready to cut. Okay, so after we've cut up all the scraps that we can, I ended up getting a 41 for all the black. So if that's all we need, great. But, you know, we'll see. I ended up getting 22 squares for the white, 20 for the green, and 18 for the purple. Yeah, that purple, the scraps I had left were just weird, so I had to cut it down a lot. But anyway, so we don't have too much more left to go, you know, in theory. So I'll go ahead and have to pick out the big fabric out of that bag and start on that. Okay, I just want to show this real quick. So my first round of strips that I originally cut out wasn't quite long enough, so I ended up with 337 inches. We need 386. So hey, you know what? At least we're in the 300s, so that's a good start. Which means we needed 49 inches more, and it dawned on me that really all I should have done from the beginning is so 49 inches divided by 2, because if you remember, our seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch, but it's 1/4 of an inch on each side, so that is going to equal 1/2 an inch. So instead of being 2.5 inches, we're just going to take off that half and then just go down to 2. So I figured, you know, it's 24.5, so about 25 more strips. And then I figured 25 divided by 4, because there's 4 different colors, so about 7 strips each. I just rounded it. So that's how I ended up with all of that. All right, so I have finally finished sewing all of my little strips together, and it ended up being 406 inches, 409 inches, something like that. Either way, it was more than what we really needed, which was 386 inches total, but it's always better to have more than you need, so that way if you have to cut some off, which we will have to cut a little bit off, kind of like the method that I'm going to be doing. I don't know how much it's really going to affect it, but it probably won't be all that much. But anyway, the next thing I'll have to do is iron down all of these little seams that I've got, because we want it to be as flat as possible to make it really easy to fold together and, you know, finish it out. So I'm going to get started on that. Okay, so I have finally opened all these seams up and I have pressed them down so everything is flat. So the next step in the binding is to put the wrong sides together, and we're going to press all the way down basically like this. I'm just doing this one-handed, but you get the idea. I'm going to do this off camera as well because it will take a little bit, not as long as the other, but still yet. All right, just got done folding all that over and ironing all of that. So there is my little pile there. Okay, so I know this is kind of a weird setup here. I just have my quilt laying on my chair for right now just to show you all this. So I'm just going to talk about how I'm going to go about putting the binding on the back of the quilt. And I say the back of the quilt because apparently it does look better. Putting it on the back first and then folding it over to the front is just kind of what I've discovered. I don't honestly remember even what I did with my other quilt, but anyway. So I picked a location here. The continuous method is a little bit different because, you know, with my other quilt, I did like an end to another end, and then I stopped, and then I did that all the way around. Well, this one we're not really stopping, so I kind of just picked an area. This is like the bottom of the quilt. Not really in the middle, I don't think. I kind of just picked an area. So this is raw edge to raw edge. So this is the raw edge right here, and we line this up. So what I have going on here is this is unfolded, and then you make a fold here, and then you fold it again, and it creates like this little pocket. So that way, whenever you're stitching over here and you have your extra little bit of fabric, you can pop it in there and then sew it across, and it's kind of more seamless. And I think it would be more secure and prevent things from, I know I keep saying popping out, but no, really, like my other quilt did have a couple of things pop out. So I am really hoping that this is going to be the solution to that. Okay, a couple reasons I stopped. Number one, I'm noticing the amount that I have here on the floor, and I feel like that's really not very much. So I'm getting pretty concerned about that, I'm not gonna lie. I guess I'll keep you updated on that. But the other reason I stopped is because I'm coming to a corner, and I'll have to miter the corner, which I've never done before. I'm watching that YouTube tutorial thing to kind of see how she's gonna do that. Okay, so according to the video, you need to stop 1/4 of an inch away from the end, and I just put a little pin there so I know when to stop. So let's go ahead and sew to that pin. Okay, so we're about there, and then she says something about lifting up this and also the needle, completely taking it out away from the fabric. Woo. Okay, and then we'll see what she does next. Okay, I have this at a weird angle just so you can kind of see it. So here we got our stitch there where we ended it 1/4 of an inch from the end. I did a little back stitching there just to secure it. So basically what you do is you bring it up, fold it here, and then as long as you're parallel there, then that's how you know you did it right. And then you're going to bring it back and line it up with that corner there. So then you're just going to stitch down and then across and just continue like normal. Okay, that was nerve-wracking, but here we are at the end finally. We end up having, quite a bit left here, and it's really deceiving. Like, I looked at the stuff on the floor and I was like, oh gosh, there's no way. But I kind of noticed as I was sewing, like, a little goes a long way. It really does. So I pretty much got to, sorry, I'm trying to get in the right spot. Got to where my little pocket is here. And I think I have to just trim it down, and then I just sew it all kind of together. So that way it's nice and secure. Alright, so we've got everything attached to the back side, but now we're going to want to flip it and sew it onto the front. However, what we're going to go ahead and do first is we're actually going to iron all this down just to kind of make it easier to do that. Okay, so we've got everything all nice and ironed. It's sticking up here, which is a good sign. That's how we want it. But I came into a roadblock, so I didn't think about the fact that whenever we turn this to the front, we will see the stitching color, and I don't actually have the color match for that purple. I was thinking, oh yeah, I have a couple purples, no big deal. Okay, but I have like this option, which I don't know if you can really tell, but this is like a warmer tone purple, and then the one on here is a cooler tone. Okay, no big deal, right? I have another one. Okay, this one's also a warm tone, it's just darker. So it's one of those things, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to finish it tonight. I thought about being crazy and like going to Walmart when they open, which they're actually open now. They just opened like 20 minutes ago. But you know what? I haven't been able to really relax all night because I've been working on this. So I'm just going to call it quits for tonight. I mean, I did get a lot done though. I finished up my binding. I got it attached, so at least if I, wait or whatever, I can kind of take my time. I won't feel rushed or, annoyed that I'm like trying to finish this and all one night. But anyway, so unfortunately, I won't be able to finish this video now. The video will continue, and you will see me, I don't know, honestly, probably in at least a few days when I can get the thread. Hello, and welcome to the last part of the binding process. So, where we last left off, I was talking about needing new thread for the top of the binding, because that's the thread color that you're going to see, and not quite having the right color. So I went to the store today, and I picked out two new ones. So if you remember this one, well, of course you probably remember because you just saw that part. But anyway, this is the one that I originally had, and then I got this one, which is honestly just ended up just being like a lighter version of that one that I already had, and then I got this one. This ended up being closer, but it just wasn't quite right. In fact, this one's actually a little bit lighter than the color on the quilt. So you can kind of see like the differences here between all of them. They're well, like I said, these are pretty similar, just this one's lighter, but this one's quite a lot different. So then I had to come to the decision, like, what do I do about this? Do I want to go ahead and just use the one that's closest, or what? So, and I'm kind of glad I did this, I went ahead and picked up a green because I had considered doing just a different color altogether, and I decided this is what I'm going to go with. It looks pretty good. I kind of put it next to, you know, the green that's on the quilt, and I do like it. I was just so afraid of, you know, not finding the exact purple or close enough to where you wouldn't really be able to tell. And honestly, I know you won't really be able to tell much anyway, because it's going to be so small, and really it's just holding it together on the, you know, sides. But I thought, you know what, I have plenty of time. If I want to do it just a certain way, then I will, and that's what's happening. So the only downside of obviously getting a new thread is I'm going to have to, you know, make a bobbin for it and everything like that. So I will be doing that first, and then we will go from there. Okay, so I want to go ahead and just record this now before I actually start sewing the binding, so I don't have to like stop and explain. So, as you know, we're going to fold it onto the other side. So, how to kind of gauge that, and honestly, it's just going to be kind of by feel. There's not like really a big tip I have. You just fold it over, and then you can kind of feel like where it's nice and flat. And then I'll be using clips here. I think that's going to be better than pins, because, you know, I always get stabbed. But anyway, and then you just kind of make your way down, just feeling, and you'll put your next pin in, and, you know, so on and so forth. It's pretty quick. We'll see how it is once I actually start sewing, but anyway. The other part is sewing my mitered corner onto the front. So the lady that I watched on YouTube, this is actually a different lady this time that I watched. She, which they all probably say about the same thing. But anyway, she says to cut a little bit of bulk off of this corner, which I've already done that. And the trick is whenever you fold this over, so you can see our little pleat here. This side is on the top, and this side is on the bottom. So basically, how you're going to fold it on this side is just the opposite of that. So since this side is on the top, when we fold it, we're actually going to go on the bottom, and then basically the opposite of the other. So this goes on bottom, and then this one goes on top, and that is our little corner there. It's not perfect, I'll have to mess with it, but this little line when you fold it is supposed to be, you know, diagonal. So that's about it there. The only other thing I'm gonna note before I start is you want to get pretty close when you're stitching. Like, I don't even know, I think the actual figure is like 1/8 of an inch, which would be, you know, 1/2 of a quarter or whatever. I'll have to play with it and see, but you want it like very close to the edge. You just want like a little sliver of fabric still kind of hanging out there. So I think that's about it, and I will probably just kind of finish clipping as much as I can, and we'll get started. Okay, so now that I've got done with that, I just want to share some things with you. I have a pin here that is very bent. I did end up using pins and clips because I wanted to just do all one continuous. I didn't want to stop every time and, you know, pin the next side or clip the next side, whatever. So for thick binding, using pins is probably not a good idea, so it'd be good to maybe stock up on clips instead. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is the thick binding. So I don't know if you can kind of see here, it's subtle, but like where it gets thick, it kind of goes down. So another method I could have used to piece these together, and I honestly don't remember if I actually mentioned this or not in another video. I could have sewn these together at like sort of a diagonal, and that was supposed to reduce some of the bulk. But first of all, me being a beginner, I didn't really know how to go about doing that. And yeah, so I just didn't. Next time, or if there is a next time, I might try the diagonal method to reduce the bulk. But yeah, when your sewing machine goes over, you know, sort of a flatter part, and then it goes over a little thick part, it just has trouble kind of keeping in the same position. So there was a lot of that. These lines are definitely not straight. I was actually kind of glad for, you know, like the green when it came up, because it's like not as noticeable. So yeah, it was rough, I'm just going to say. And that's also why it just took me so long. I honestly don't even want to think about how long it really took me to do all this. And then as you can maybe also see, I was doing a lot of stopping and starting just because there were some areas that just looked crazy. That I just kind of wanted to redo. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I mean, it's done now. It does look pretty good on the other side, which some people do it that way. Actually, probably a lot of people do it that way. But as you can see, my thread is there. Obviously, if you're doing it this way, you'd be sewing in the ditch, which would be like right along there, I believe. So this wouldn't be, you know, all crazy and out of place like it is, but this is the back, so in that case, it really doesn't matter. But anyway, I think that's about it for the comments on that. Oh, and another thing I want to mention that I think is actually really important to this process. I have a chair here. I don't know, maybe you saw it kind of in there a little bit. It helped kind of hold the rest of the fabric that I wasn't sewing so it wouldn't pull as much. Honestly, when I was doing the other, I should have had a chair. Luckily, that turned out fine. It really wasn't a big deal, but I am glad. Who knows how much more worse it would have been if I hadn't had the chair to kind of hold like the bulk of the fabric. So I have this little part that's supposed to come out, but every time I pull on my quilt, it always flops down, which it did the exact same thing as it always does when I was doing it. So I was like, you know what, the chair is better. And it really was. It did maybe not look like it, but it did take a lot of the weight off. All right, so here is the quilt all finished. I went ahead and just put it on the floor. I'm standing on a step stool right now so you can see all of it. I think from here the border looks fine. But anyway, my cat's already gotten her home on it there. So the last thing I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and wash it, take out some of the stiffness, and it did get a little dirty on the bottom in one spot, so just like a little dusty, I think. But anyway, there it is, and finally it's done.